Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition where we interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. Today is no exception. We have a great guest all the way from Northern Virginia. Welcome to the show, Chris Seveney.
Hey, Victor. Thanks for having me today.
Well, great to have you here. Now, Chris, you come from the debt world, and I'm excited to have this conversation. There's a lot that we're seeing happening in the marketplace. Some of the things that have been forecast over the last couple of years are now starting to come true. But maybe before we dive into the details, perhaps give a little bit of your backstory and how you got to this point in your journey.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on today. For me, my journey started almost 30 years ago after I graduated college, and I've always been in real estate. I spent 15 years working for a large commercial contractor, and then after that, I started working for a real estate developer. And once I started working for a real estate developer that did about $300 to $400 million per year, that's when I started diversifying my own portfolio. So that was almost 15 years ago. And like most people in real estate, start with some single family rentals. Back then, it was the BRRRR strategy that people were very familiar with. And 10 years ago is when I got more into the debt space because I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, which is a very expensive and competitive market. And that's what led me into the debt side. And now I've been last 10 years buying non-performing mortgages. So, which a lot of people never even kind of heard of. Everyone hears about private lending and, that sort of things. But I didn't know till I started in this business that you could actually go out and buy loans that were in default.
Yeah, absolutely. And typically the scenario there, correct me if I'm wrong, is to take a note that is being acquired from a lender, presumably at a discount, and then to negotiate some form of loan modification with the borrower to bring that loan back into good standing, season it, and then sell it still at a discount to its original face value, but perhaps at a profit to what you paid for it. Is that the basic core of the strategy?
100%. As people like to think of, another way we explain it is, instead of fix and flipping a house, that you buy something in distress, fix it up, then resell it. We're trying to do that with the borrower, which is buy it as a discount, get it, modified, and then sell it back on the market for a premium.
Now, there's many different asset classes, many different segments that this can apply to. It can apply to single family homes as it did in the wake of 2008 on a very large scale. I bet it can also apply to commercial and different asset classes, multifamily, office, retail, industrial, you go on down the list. Where's your focus in terms of asset class and in terms of perhaps geography as well?
Yep. So we focus on the single family rental side of things, or the single family side of things. And we found, based on our size, we were about 60 million AUM. The commercial side is usually, again, it's much bigger players buying 10, 15, $20 million notes. We'd much rather have 100, 150 notes that are at $500,000 a piece than 10 notes worth $6 million a piece. So that's kind of where we play geographically. We've invested in over 40 states, and some we've learned that's why I've got a lot of grays on my head now, get out of, such as states like New York and others. But our focus now is typically, from Pennsylvania down the Southeast and across over to Texas. Kind of that swath of the country is where we see most of our inventory, exclusive of, again, Northeast, Northwest. We usually don't see a lot anyways in those areas. So
that makes sense. Now, there's different regulations in various states. Some are judicial foreclosure, some are power of sale. Does the jurisdiction, just that core principle, does that drive where you choose to acquire these notes?
It 100% does. Now, we'll invest in judicial states that still have to go through the courts, but there are certain states, and most people just, from New York as an example, it could take 5 years to foreclose in New York, where if the loan was in Georgia, you're done in 3 or 4 months. So to give, wide ends of the spectrum between different things. But yeah, 100% is we evaluate every single state and kind of the laws and what's required to also work in those states, because some states you have to have special licenses. It can get very problematic and difficult and challenging to work in specific areas.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, single family homes, you're in a bunch of states, the states that are easier to do business in. What are you seeing in the marketplace? I mean, we are definitely seeing pullback in property values, certainly in some areas. There are some areas, for example, if I think of areas along the west coast of Florida, Cape Coral comes to mind as one that right now there's a lot of inventory in the market that maybe that market might have been a little overheated at one point. Would that be a good example, or are there other areas that you're focused on?
I'm laughing because literally 10 minutes before this call, I got a list of non-performing loans that were five of them. They're all in Cape Coral. Cape Coral, Houston, I'd say that southwest area of Florida from, Tampa, Port Charlotte, kind of down that area. We're seeing a lot. Texas, areas that have been hit hard with taxes and insurance. You're seeing more distress and default. And recently, we've seen it more on the investor side, where institutions who are doing a lot of the debt service coverage ratio loans or the fix and flip loans, because construction costs got more. It's taking people longer to finish. So we've seen a significant uptick in those types of loans on the owner occupied. We're starting to see more of those, especially during the COVID loans that are at 3 and 4%. And one of the reasons why is I think it was FHA changed their waterfall structure where they used to be able to modify the loan multiple times, but now they've restricted it to only one modification, I think, within the first 24 months. You're seeing a lot of people in this space, we hear the term scratch and dent, which is, loans that either stopped paying or had some type of paper issue that is putting them also back on the market. So we're seeing uptick there. In the last place we're seeing it is in the HUD HECM loans, which are the reverse mortgages, which eventually, those, individuals pass away and those are usually underwater. So we're seeing a significant uptick in those coming to market.
Fascinating. So I'm surprised to hear that there's FHA loans that are crossing your desk, because the conventional wisdom is you're rate locked for 30 years. It's a fixed rate. You've got, something that is rather predictable, and they shouldn't really be upside down. And even if they are, you can wait it out.
Yeah. And if you actually check some of the statistics coming out right now, overall, I'd say we're still, in the COVID swoon of being at all-time lows on defaults across most, because also a lot of people have so much equity because of, the valuations that have gone up since COVID time. But the FHAs, because I think they also have lower down payments, their default rate is almost identical, I believe, to what the default rate was in 2008. It's floating I think last I heard, around 11%, I believe is what I heard recently.
My goodness. Now, that when you say 11%, anytime someone says percent, I say percent of what? That can't be percent of the entire universe of FHA loans.
It's percent of loans that are FHA loans that are in default. So if, right now, overall, I know there's, the mortgage market's 14 trillion. I believe there's 50 million homes that have a mortgage on them. Now, how many of those have FHA? I don't know.
Probably about 70%, I would guess.
Yep. So if you're saying, let's say it was 50%, just easy numbers, 25 million mortgages. So that would basically mean about 2.5 million homes that are, in some type of, more than 30 days late. So, which,
wow,
in 100, when you still look at it aggregate, there's 100+ million homes in the country, even at 2.5%, 3%, it's a lot, but it's not percentage wise overall compared to everything, something that is, I would say, out of the ordinary.
Default rates in the U.S. have always been higher. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada, and in the wake of 2008, I would say Canada hardly felt the great financial crisis, at least from a real estate perspective. And yet there were some markets, Miami-Dade County, Maricopa County, where Phoenix is located, Las Vegas. Some of those markets had extraordinarily high default rates, north of 10% in the wake of '08. And it sounds like there are some micro markets where we're starting to return to those kind of numbers.
Yeah. And for people, I'm not a doom and gloom type of person in regards to There are certain markets that are getting hit harder. And I would say the markets that typically had the higher appreciation than other locations, higher you are, the harder they fall type of situation. I know, for example, Boise, Idaho, which prior to COVID, nobody probably would have ever considered investing there. And then a lot of money went into that area with, I think, also Intel and some companies going there. But what happens sometimes in these markets, and you're seeing this in Austin, you keep hearing about all these companies going to Austin and moving from California, but the people they're paying $150,000 in California are still only making $75,000 in Austin, and they can't afford the $800,000 home, and everyone's building homes and trying to sell them for $800,000. Comes a point in time where the salaries just in that area does not keep up with the cost of housing, and something's got to give. I saw a report last night that some areas of Phoenix now in the multifamily side are offering 4-month concessions on rent because they've got, buildings that were built during COVID that they don't have enough people, or the people just can't afford the payment for the rent payments.
We saw that in the wake of '08 in the Phoenix area as well. There were $99 move-in specials. There were 3 months free back in those days. And so what I'm hearing is that we're starting to return to some of those conditions in a few of these markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. And we get, for example, in January, we had about $4 billion of non-performing loans cross our desk. And if I analyze it, I would say 50% of them were in Florida and Texas, which they're very big states, but typically a year prior, Florida and Texas would be, kind of mixed in with everything else. But the number of loans that we're seeing now really centralized in specific locations is very interesting. Same thing with Houston. We've last week saw multiple portfolios come across our desk, heavy concentration in the Houston area as an example.
Fascinating. Well, if folks are interested in connecting, if they want to learn more about what you have going on, what's the best way?
Yeah, go to our website. It's 7einvestments.com, the number 7, the letter E, investments.com. Find out information about everything that we have going on. All of our contact information is on the website that you can reach out to us as well to learn more about what we do.
Love it. Well, Chris, great to connect. And for the listeners at home, definitely connect with Chris Seveney at seveneyinvestments.com. The link will be in the show notes. And in the meantime, have an awesome rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.